Welcome back to Lecture 04, a new look at Plato's theory of recollection. Today, we'll journey through one of the most profound and enduring aspects of Plato's epistemology, the idea that learning is a process of remembering. Plato's theory of recollection posits that our soul already possesses all knowledge and that learning merely recalls these eternal truths. To truly engage with the ideas we'll discuss today, I strongly recommend reading Plato's Meno, Phaedo, and Phaedrus before diving into this lecture. These texts form the foundation of our exploration, and without them, it would be difficult to grasp the full depth of Plato's thoughts on knowledge, learning, and the immortality of the soul. If you haven't already, revisiting these dialogues will enrich your experience and provide valuable context for today's analysis. We will revisit critical moments from Meno's paradox, Socrates' arguments for the soul's immortality in Phaedo, and the vivid metaphors of recollection in Phaedrus. Understanding these works will not only clarify Plato's view on recollection, still, it will also sharpen our inquiry into whether this theory is a timeless metaphor or a more profound claim about reality. I urge you to read the texts, not as passive consumers, but as active participants in philosophical inquiry, questioning their relevance to ancient and modern thought. By doing so, you'll find yourself better equipped to appreciate the complexity and beauty of Plato's dialogues, especially in light of the broader themes of self-realization and the nature of knowledge. As with all the primary texts we'll engage with, each one is indispensable in building a coherent understanding of Plato's thought. Be sure to read or reference Plato Reimagined alongside today's lecture, which offers valuable commentary and endnotes to guide your learning. Let's now delve into the nature of recollection and what it truly means to know. Lecture 04, a new look at Plato's theory of recollection. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we'll delve into Plato's theory of recollection, a central component of his epistemology and metaphysical thought. The theory suggests that learning is not the acquisition of new knowledge, but the process of recalling knowledge that the soul already possesses. As we explore this theory, we'll analyze its implications, the evidence Plato presents for it, and how it influences later philosophical thought. Plato's dialogues, such as the Meno, Phaedo, and Phaedrus, provide fertile ground for exploring this concept in depth. Our goal today is to revisit these foundational texts, question their relevance, and ask ourselves if Plato's idea of recollection remains a powerful metaphor or something more profound. The origin of recollection. Meno. The concept of recollection first appears in Plato's Meno. Socrates, in his dialogue with Meno, introduces the idea as a solution to Meno's paradox. The paradox is simple. How can we search for something we do not know? If we don't know what it is, we won't recognize it when we find it. But if we already know it, why search? In response, Socrates posits that the soul is immortal and has seen all things before its embodiment. Therefore, learning is a process of recollecting what the soul already knows. Plato, Meno, 81 CD. This notion is radical. It suggests that knowledge is not something we acquire from the external world, but something intrinsic to our being. According to Plato, the human soul has an eternal existence, moving through various cycles of life and death. During these transitions, the soul becomes acquainted with the forms, the perfect, unchanging ideas that represent the truest essence of things. What we call learning, then, is really the soul recalling these forms, albeit imperfectly, in our material existence, 81E, 82B. To illustrate this point, Socrates famously uses the young boy in the Meno to demonstrate that the boy can solve a complex geometric problem without ever having been taught geometry. Socrates asks the boy leading questions, guiding him to the correct answer. According to Socrates, this proves that the boy must have had latent knowledge of geometry, which was merely waiting to be recalled, Meno, 85B, 86B. The boy's ability to deduce the solution without formal education is presented as evidence that knowledge is innate. But this example raises questions. Is the boy truly recalling some forgotten knowledge, or is he simply being led through a series of logical steps by Socrates? Is Plato's notion of recollection an elegant way to explain the intuitive leaps humans make in understanding, or is it merely a justification for the Socratic method? These are questions we must keep in mind as we move forward. Recollection and the forms. Phaedo. In Phaedo, Plato extends the theory of recollection to emphasize the relationship between recollection and the world of the forms. This dialogue, set on the day of Socrates' death, is deeply concerned with the immortality of the soul and its relationship to truth. Here, Plato argues that the process of recollection demonstrates that the soul existed before birth and will continue to exist after death. If we can recall knowledge of abstract concepts like equality or beauty, concepts that we've never encountered in their perfect forms in the physical world, then our souls must have had access to these forms in a previous, non-physical existence. Phaedo, 73a, 75b. The argument from recollection in Phaedo differs slightly from that in Meno. While the latter focuses more on specific knowledge, such as geometry, Phaedo concerns itself with more abstract, universal concepts. Plato asks us to consider how we recognize instances of beauty, justice, or equality in the world when we have never encountered their perfect form. Any physical example of beauty, for instance, is always imperfect. So where do we get our understanding of the perfect, immutable concept of beauty? According to Plato, we must have encountered the form of beauty in a pre-bodily state, and our encounters with beautiful things in this world are simply triggers for recollecting that original encounter. Phaedo, 75b, 76e. In this way, recollection is not just about intellectual knowledge, but also about our ability to recognize the fundamental nature of reality. The soul, having had direct experience with the forms, is equipped to navigate the material world by recalling these perfect, unchangeable truths. This also ties into Plato's larger metaphysical project, which seeks to demonstrate the existence of a realm beyond the physical, a realm that contains the only true reality, unchanging, eternal, and intelligible. This relationship between recollection and the forms is central to Plato's theory of knowledge. If knowledge is the recollection of the forms, then learning is essentially an inward journey. It's not about accumulating information from the world, but about looking within, through rational reflection, to access the truths the soul already knows. This inward journey is what makes philosophy such a vital discipline for Plato. In dialogues like the Phaedo, he suggests that philosophy is the practice of preparing the soul for death, that is, for the moment when the soul will leave the body and return to the world of the forms, Phaedo, 67d, 69d. Recollection as a process of self-realization, Phaedrus. In Phaedrus, Plato takes a more poetic approach to the theory of recollection, using myth to emphasize its significance in human life. The dialogue describes the soul as a charioteer pulled by two horses, one noble and one base. The noble horse represents the soul's yearning for truth and beauty, while the base horse pulls it toward worldly desires. When the soul glimpses beauty in the physical world, it recalls the form of beauty, which it has seen in its pre-bodily existence. Phaedrus, 246a, 250b. This recollection leads the soul to rise above its earthly concerns and strive for higher knowledge. The imagery Plato uses here is vivid and emotionally charged, illustrating how the process of recollection is not merely intellectual, but deeply tied to the human experience of longing and desire. The recollection of the forms, especially beauty, stirs the soul, leading it to transcend its earthly condition and aspire to something greater. This yearning for the divine is an essential part of human nature, according to Plato, and recollection is the process by which we reconnect with our divine origins. The Phaedrus also hints at the idea that recollection is not merely about individual learning, but is central to the philosopher's task of guiding others toward truth. The philosopher, having recollected the forms, acts as a guide to help others recall what they already know. In this sense, recollection is an ethical process as well as an intellectual one. By helping others to recollect, the philosopher helps them to fulfill their highest potential. This process of recollection, particularly when it involves the forms, points toward an important ethical dimension of Plato's philosophy. The philosopher who helps others recollect is not simply imparting knowledge, they are helping their students achieve a higher moral understanding. Recollection, in this sense, leads to virtue. In the Phaedrus, Plato describes the soul's memory of the forms as the source of all true love, wisdom, and goodness. When we recall the form of beauty, for example, we are motivated to act virtuously, to strive toward that ideal, and to shape our lives in accordance with it. Phaedrus, 2M53D, 254B. Recollection and education. And, given the importance of recollection in Plato's theory of knowledge, it naturally follows that education, for Plato, is not about filling an empty mind with information. Rather, it is about guiding the soul to recall the truths it already knows. This is why Socrates famously describes himself as a midwife, whose job is to help others give birth to the knowledge that is already within them. Theaetetus, 150 AB. This metaphor of intellectual midwifery captures Plato's view of education as an active, cooperative process. The teacher does not provide knowledge. They merely help the student realize what they already know. The implications of this for educational theory are profound. In contrast to modern educational models that emphasize the transfer of information from teacher to student, Plato's model suggests that true education is about self-discovery. The teacher is more of a guide than an authority, helping the student navigate their own path toward understanding. This model of education has influenced countless thinkers, from the Renaissance humanists to modern proponents of student-centered learning. But Plato's model also raises difficult questions. If all knowledge is recollection, what role does experience play in learning? Can we truly recollect knowledge of something we have never encountered before? For example, how can we recall knowledge of scientific concepts that depend on empirical observation? Plato's theory seems to downplay the importance of sensory experience, which has led to criticism from empiricist philosophers like Aristotle, who argued that knowledge comes from experience rather than recollection. Criticisms and alternative interpretations. While Plato's theory of recollection is compelling, it is not without its critics. One of the most common criticisms is that the theory is circular. Plato argues that we can recognize imperfect examples of beauty because we already have knowledge of the perfect form of beauty. But how do we know the perfect form of beauty in the first place? Plato's answer, that we recall it from a previous existence, does not fully resolve the problem. It merely pushes the question back a step. How did we acquire knowledge of the forms before our current existence? If knowledge is truly innate, then how did it come to reside in the soul in the first place? Some philosophers, such as Aristotle, reject Plato's theory of recollection in favor of a more empiricist account of knowledge. For Aristotle, knowledge comes from sensory experience and the process of abstraction, not from recollecting innate ideas. While we may recognize common patterns in our experiences of beauty or justice, this does not mean that we have some pre-existing knowledge of these concepts. Rather, we form abstract ideas through repeated encounters with similar instances in the material world. Metaphysics, 980A, 980B. In modern philosophy, thinkers such as Immanuel Kant have attempted to synthesize Plato's rationalism with empiricism. Kant agreed with Plato that some knowledge, such as our understanding of space and time, is innate, but he also emphasized the role of sensory experience in shaping our knowledge of the world. Critique of Pure Reason, A20, B35. This view, known as transcendental idealism, offers a more nuanced account of how innate knowledge and sensory experience interact to produce understanding. Conclusion. In conclusion, Plato's theory of recollection is a profound and influential idea that has shaped our understanding of knowledge, learning, and the nature of reality. By suggesting that knowledge is innate and that learning is a process of recalling what we already know, Plato challenges us to rethink the role of education and the nature of human understanding. While his theory raises important questions about the nature of the soul, the relationship between knowledge and experience, and the role of the teacher, it continues to inspire and provoke discussion in both philosophy and education. Whether we view recollection as a literal process of remembering past lives or as a metaphor for intellectual discovery, it remains a powerful and enduring concept in the history of ideas.